No, Cookie, I am shocked that you still support Kristi Noem, despite what she said she did. Very weird, Cooks. Oh, hey, everybody. Welcome to J-L's Book Club, where we don't talk about Fight Club because I didn't read Fight Club. This month, I'm a little late, but I hope you'll forgive me. I had major dental work done last week. Plus, I was reading a little slowly. Plus, it was my birthday. So a little delay. Unfortunately, I didn't get you your April, but this month you're going to have 2 episodes. This one and then one at the end of the month. So thank you, Cookie, for nudging my leg. Appreciate that. This month we have a beverage of the month, obviously. This month it is Oatly, oat milk, because you can only hear about how much water almonds drain before you switch to a less water-intensive milk substitute. Oat milk. Okay, 2 books this month, and they're both kings. Stephen and Martin Luther. Cousins, I believe, possibly even half-brothers. I don't know exactly the relation between these two, but obviously 2 major figures in the world and literature. Do you like that? Do you like it when I say literature? I feel like that's maybe the way I used to say literature, but I feel like maybe saying literature is a little more of a snooty way of saying it. But which one do you want to start with? I agree, Stephen King. This book is called Holly. Now, the reason I got it, I've read probably, I don't know, 9, 10 Stephen King books at this point, and a trilogy he wrote that I really liked, the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. It was Mr. Mercedes, I want to say Jeepers Creepers, and End of Watch was the trilogy. Highly recommend those. They're really easy reads with summer just around the corner. Those are sort of perfect summer read type books. And Peacock, if you're not a reader, which I know certainly most of my fans aren't watchers of book reviews, so if you don't even like watching book content, then I don't know why you'd want to read book content, also known as books. But the Peacock series with Brendan Gleeson, Mr. Mercedes, fantastic. There have been a lot of Stephen King adaptations, and obviously Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption, Stand By Me are sort of the critically acclaimed ones, but those are off of short stories. I think Mr. Mercedes is my favorite Stephen King adaptation ever in terms of like a full-length book, and I'm including Misery and things like that. I thought Peacock did a phenomenal job, so I would recommend reading and watching the series. But Holly is a spin-off of a character from that trilogy. Now, when I learned that, I bought the book. And of course, about 10 pages in, I go, what the fuck are they talking about? Well, it turns out Holly Gibney, the character, is also in like 2 other books, which weren't as... Now, there was The Outsider, which was made into an HBO series with Jason Bateman. And Cynthia Erivo played the role of Holly. And I said, my Holly is white, okay? And I don't think it's a coincidence that HBO canceled The Outsider after 1 season, okay? We don't need your woke DEI casting. What's that? Cynthia Erivo's an Oscar nominee? Huh. Well, anyway, the woman who played Holly in the Mr. Mercedes trilogy was the woman who played, what was the name of the oldest, I'm asking my producer right now, what was the name of the oldest daughter, the oldest son on Succession? Cameron from Ferris Bueller. Well, anyway, I'm forgetting his name, but you know who I'm talking about. Alan Ruck is the actor. His wife/escort. She plays Holly Gibney, which it took me a minute on Succession to realize that's where I knew her from because they were very different roles. Then there's another short story by Stephen King that I forget. I looked it up, but that I did not read, which is sort of referenced in this book. But the overwhelming majority of context for Holly Gibney is the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. So I got this book. I read it in like a little over a week. Very much enjoyed it. I just the pacing of a Stephen King book. If you've never read any Stephen King books, they're largely pretty enjoyable. I think I was turned off as a kid from Stephen King because me and my mother both agreed that he looked as scary as some of his books. But he writes very well. They're enjoyable. I will say this, even though we're talking about Holly, the most disappointing Stephen King book I ever read was Under the Dome, which was made into a shitty series on CBS. But Under the Dome for like 700 pages was awesome. And at the end of the book, it was such a, I felt, cop-out, much like Lost, the TV series Lost, where it's like, hey, the journey is fun, you're asking profound questions. I mean, there's an assumption that when you're reading a good book that the payoff will pay off, the end will pay off, or else, oh, well, anybody can ask cool questions and big mysteries, but if you don't answer them in a satisfying way, then it's almost like it's like I call those intellectual Ponzi schemes or literary Ponzi schemes, where it's like, I keep building cool things, oh my God, the payoff's going to be great. And when there is no payoff, you're like, well, anybody can build worlds and things, but if there's no payoff, then it's like, oh, well, of course you were able to make these cool things because you never had any intention. That's how I honestly felt about Under the Dome. For 700 pages, I was like, this is amazing. And then I was like, that's the resolution? Boo. This book is much less, it's not like a supernatural thing. It's basically this elderly couple is committing a series of heinous murders and eating people. You learn that relatively early into the book. And Holly, through a matter of different circumstances, is on the case. What I love about this, and I'll read a brief passage from this before we get to the MLK biography, I love the fact that in a lot of Stephen King's books, the bad guys are often have a lot of bad qualities to them, which I kind of like. Like, if they are racist, they're also homophobic and anti-Semitic. And I see that in a lot of his books, where they kind of like, a bad character will kind of embody a lot of different hates, which we might think of as separate things, but as I've learned in my own life, often when you hear somebody express some homophobia, it won't be shocking to hear them express maybe a dash of anti-Semitism or a dash of racism. You don't like, and so his villains often are like, on the surface, in this, like a pair of professors at a college, but underneath it, every time they meet somebody, they mention, the woman mentions like they're gay, or they're black, or they're this, and seems to hate all things that aren't like her. So just a quick, it's hard to pick out a passage from a book to be like, and here's a nice page of Stephen King, because it's a 400-page novel. But I just thought, when Emily, that's one of the professors, when M comes down the stairs at noon on the 24th, the maggots and flies are back on the slab of liver. She looks at them crawling around on a perfectly good cut of meat, well it was, with disgust and dismay. They simply have no business being there so fast. They have no business being there at all. They're keeping people hot before they eat them. They keep them caged and try to... You just read the book, you'll understand it. In terms of like her husband's a scientist, and like he says like eating, human liver is like very good for you. She pushes the meat towards the pass-through with the broom, and although Ellen looks exhausted, that's the hostage, the cracks in her lips bleeding, her complexion the color of clay, she again blocks the hinged panel with her foot. M takes a bottle of water from her apron pocket and is delighted by the way the girl's eyes fix on it. And when her tongue comes out in a useless effort to moisten those parched lips, that is also delightful. Take it, Ellen, brush off the bugs and eat. Then I'll give you water. For one moment she thinks the stubborn girl means to give in. Then she says what she always says, I'm a vegan. You're a bitch is what you are. Emily can barely restrain herself from saying it. The girl is infuriating, and it doesn't help that the goddamn sciatica has kept her up half the night. An uppity, smart-ass bitch. All caps, black bitch. That's what she's thinking. Now, I only say that because I just wanted to say that. No, I'm kidding. I wanted to say it because that's what I kind of like, and Stephen King, if you've ever followed him on Twitter, is a fairly progressive liberal guy, I think. I just like that his human villains, there's almost a subtext that's like, yeah, one form of prejudice or hate, you sort of embody most of them. If you're this, then you're probably also this. And these villains in this book exhibit that. This book, I would say the ending was also not as satisfying. It's not an Under the Dome situation, but it's sort of a surprising ending that I was like, oh, that's it? Oh, okay. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't a great ending as far as I'm concerned. But but it wasn't really a letdown either. I liked the book, and if you're a Stephen King fan, I would say start with the Mr. Mercedes trilogy for sure, maybe this summer. And then by then, maybe Holly will be in paperback anyway, and you won't have to get this very deluxe, weighty tome version. So that's the first book. Okay, that was the opening act. Stephen King, you rarely open for people in book talks, but when your cousin Martin Luther King Jr. is the main subject, you take a back seat, Stephen. King, A Life by Jonathan Eig. This book got really good reviews. It is 557 pages, which may sound long, but it's 230 pages shorter than the Magic Johnson biography I read a couple of months ago, which seems odd. It seems odd, but when you spend 300 pages discussing Magic Johnson's high school career, I guess you can come up with an 800-page book. But like Magic Johnson, Martin Luther King was a freak in the sheets. He had a high body. Now, Magic Johnson had a tremendous body count by athlete standards, which is obviously one of the high, other than porn, that's the highest standard I think you can have in terms of body count. But on a pastor scale, MLK Jr. might have even been more of a dog than Magic Johnson. I say that with respect. This book got really good reviews. President Barack Obama claimed to have read it on his best books of the year. Sometimes I'm a pretty voracious reader, and I think a leader in the biracial book community, I take a little umbrage at Obama always claiming to be like, here's the 33 books I recommend, the 48 albums, and the 22 movies, some of which I produced. I look at that and I go, did you read all those books while you were producing these movies and sailing with Michelle and doing all this other stuff? I don't know, because I'm reading a lot too, and I know you're a Harvard Law guy. You outrank me and out-intellectual me, but I'm grinding out these books, Barack, okay? So I did read this for real. Maybe Obama did too, but I'm just saying, I don't want to sound like Trump. Show me proof that you read the books. I just want proof. I may be sounding a little like Trump there. Maybe it's starting to... like a Stephen King villain. Maybe the prejudices of my character are starting to infect my own pristine character. But this is a book, I had previously read Taylor Branch's trilogy on the King years, which were not an exclusive biography of Martin Luther King, though he is the central character of the book. But that's a book that basically is a trilogy that's 1954 to 1968. Highly recommend those. Between the three books, they've won almost every major book award. And I would say I learned plenty in those books, but this one was like completely dedicated to MLK from cradle to grave. And I can't remember what those books honestly said that, like, what was new in this, but this book was based on some recent research and newly released papers and documents and things. But King was banging a lot. I know that's maybe a little bit of a lowbrow headline, but he was getting it in. And his first love of his life that he wanted to marry, a white chick. And Harry Belafonte said he thinks that woman, all due respect to Coretta, who was a great woman and a great wife, he thought that woman was the love of Martin's life. And also, Martin Luther King, a lot of plagiarism in his early academic career. And I was like, wow, thank God the modern Republican Party, who loves Martin Luther King Jr. in theory and in quotation, thank God they didn't know that, because they would have canceled the fuck out of him. How can you trust this man who plagiarized his paper at seminary? No, thank you. Your whole movement, civil rights, is wrong because he plagiarized. I mean, this modern-day Republican Party would have had a field day with him going, you didn't cite your work, so therefore, no rights for black people. Sorry, them's the breaks, Martin, okay? Not calling you doctor because you're a fake doctor like Jill Biden, and you cheated on your test. So there, it's just fair, okay? Sorry, white power. That would be, the current Senate. So thank God the 1950s Senate didn't discover that he was plagiarizing. But what I thought from reading this book, and I will say this right now, it's a great book. I really liked reading it because it was dense with material, but it flowed very well. And I thought to myself, you could probably, to any parents out there who have woke kids, you could, other than your kid looking like a pretentious douche, reading like, look at me, I'm reading this very adult, large book on Martin Luther King Jr. What are you reading? Percy Jackson, you ignorant fucking 8th grader? Let me get back to my serious history that my mother gave to me. Other than your kid looking like kind of a pretentious douche, I think any kid, now I speak as a pretty smart kid myself, I think any like 8th grader, 9th grader could probably pick this up and just read through it. Not to say it's simple, but it's really rich history written in sort of plain language. You know, I only had to look up like 2 or 3 words in the 560 pages, so look at that. But what I thought reading this book is that it describes Selma as sort of the high point for Martin Luther King Jr., like the apex of his long boycott, protest, drive for legislation. You know, Voting Rights Act gets passed after Selma. And it's those last 3 years that you'll see every January, when Republicans are quoting I Have a Dream, and then the counter quotes from people in the mentions is like, obviously Republicans have never read anything beyond that. They don't know how hated he was in his later career, how controversial he was fighting anti-poverty or fighting for anti-poverty and against the Vietnam War, how his popularity plummeted both within the civil rights movement and with the broader population. I thought a crazy interesting movie would be, what if the movie begins with the passage of the Voting Rights Act? Like, we start at MLK's peak, and we watch how America treated him when he became more invested in ending poverty and the rights of people beyond just specifically black civil rights, and how his protesting of the Vietnam War was such an issue for so many people and helped sink his popularity, and how he was right on those things, and how he was for a universal basic income and all these different things. And I think it would make a very interesting movie now to show that, to be like, not to make it like this morose thing, but just to be like, yes, these last 3 years were an absolute tragedy and drain on him spiritually and mentally, as he became closer to a pariah than a hero. So the one passage I'm going to read is from a later section of the book. It's only a couple paragraphs, but he was being interviewed by David Halberstam, who I think is like a legendary journalist who I think in old age died in a car crash. And that sucks. I don't know why, because I'm morose. I thought of that. But I was like, imagine having a legendary career and be like, oh man, I'm 80, time for my golden years, and then you die in a car crash. You probably feel like you're safe from that kind of shit when you've had a long, successful life, but you're never safe. The lesson of life is that you're never safe. Vote Trump 2024. Halberstam asked if King had moved closer to the philosophy of Malcolm X. Though King said he would never embrace black separatism, he acknowledged that his approach had changed. For years, I labored with the idea of reforming the existing institutions of the society. A little change here, a little change there. He said, should I do an impression or would that be disrespectful? Now I feel quite differently. It's not a good impression, but I was just trying to, I think you've got to have a reconstruction of the entire society, a revolution of values. And this was before even climate change. Imagine he were around today. He'd be like, not only are we ruining everything, but add something else to the list. I think you've got to have a reconstruction of the entire society, a revolution of values. Specifically, King said, that might mean the nationalization of certain industries, socialism, a massive campaign of urban economic revitalization, and a guaranteed income. King also said his view of white Americans had changed. What? Are you telling me having bricks thrown at your head in Chicago and people assaulting you in Mississippi broke through the message of we're all the same? After his experience in Chicago, after seeing how white people in the North resisted appeals to integrate their schools and neighborhoods, he had concluded that only a small part of white America supported racial justice. Most Americans, he said, are unconscious racists. Well, doesn't he sound like somebody that today's Republican Party would absolutely fucking hate? Yes, he does. Those are quotes. That sounds exactly like what Republicans today are disgusted by and never stop. He would be woke. He would be DEI. He would be a fake pastor. He would be a socialist. And it makes you think. It makes you think that, and the epilogue, I don't want to spoil this, the epilogue to this book, it's worth reading the whole book, of course. I really thought it was an excellent biography. But the epilogue is like the author's chance to just be like, yeah, here's what happened after MLK died, and here's how people honored him, and how it's a bunch of bullshit, basically. Highly recommend it. For fiction, I'm a big Stephen King fan, I guess. And I would recommend that if you're at all a Stephen King fan. I'd start with the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. But come on, I mean, I know we all think we know everything, and we've heard, this is a great, like, one volume, comprehensive, very readable biography on MLK. So, as often is the case, 2 recommends. We've never really struck out with a book since, that fantasy, and my cinematographer is laughing. Never got to the second or third part of the Marlon James trilogy. I think, blood lubricating the ass rape was enough fantasy for me. But that's still, go back if you're be sure you go find it on YouTube, episode 3 of the book review show. It's probably the funniest episode I've ever done, and definitely the book that I least enjoyed that I've reviewed. So for next month, it's fiction again. Boo, JL, I want you to read. No, I like to read fiction. I feel like my theory is that fiction stimulates a different part of the brain. I could be wrong, but a reboot, I haven't read this book in about 30 years, but The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Just because I want to read the N-word a lot. So we're going to read that, and the reason I'm reading that is because the fresh off the presses new bestseller from Percival Everett, James, which is basically a retelling of Huck Finn from the perspective of N-word Jim, a character in Huckleberry Finn. So, and Percival Everett, if you don't know, is the guy who wrote the book Erasure, which was the basis of the screenplay Oscar-winning movie American Fiction. So next month will be a little, I'll set the record straight on Mark Twain. We'll really go in and decide, is he good? And then James. So those will be your book, that'll be your book review episode at the end of this month. So thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Appreciate you guys being Patreon subscribers. I think this was you think this was a good episode? I got And then, yeah, that's it, everybody. So remember, and I think I should get a t-shirt that says this. Don't you think? Books, they're like documentaries for smart people. And maybe it'll just be me looking up from a book. And people will be like, are you the meme? Are you the douchebag reading guy? I am. I'm the douchebag reading guy. So until next episode, bye-bye.